The email from Mark's lawyer arrived on my 42nd birthday, the ultimate gift from a husband of 15 years. I stared at my laptop screen, the words, "Petition for dissolution of marriage," burning into my retinas as I absently twisted the platinum band on my finger. 3 months of suspicions confirmed in a single clinical document. I closed my laptop, poured myself a generous glass of Cabernet, and stepped onto the balcony of my Manhattan apartment. 14 floors below, the city pulsed with evening, energy, oblivious to my collapsing world. My phone buzzed insistently on the counter. Mark calling for the 3rd time today. Probably to ensure I'd received his lawyer's special delivery. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. When I finally answered, his voice carried that practiced sympathetic tone he used with difficult clients. "Rebecca, we need to discuss arrangements. My lawyer says we should vacate the apartment within 30 days so it can be listed. I'm prepared to be generous with the proceeds." "Generous," I repeated, the word tasting bitter. "That's thoughtful of you, Mark." "I know this is difficult," he continued, mistaking my calm for acceptance. "But we both know that apartment is beyond your means without my income. The sooner we sell, the better financial position you'll be in." I glanced at my closed laptop where, in a different tab, sat the quarterly report for RLM Investments, my private company that Mark believed was a modest interior design business I'd started 7 years ago to keep myself occupied, while he climbed the corporate ladder at his investment firm. "When were you planning to tell me about Alyssa?" I asked, naming his 26-year-old assistant who'd been giving me thinly veiled sympathetic looks at the firm's holiday party 3 months ago. The pause confirmed everything. "That's not relevant to our asset division." "Isn't it? How long, Mark?" Another pause. 6 months. But that's not why. "Save it," I interrupted. "I'll have my lawyer contact yours regarding the apartment. Don't call again unless it's through legal channels." I ended the call and opened my laptop, navigating away from the divorce petition to my company's dashboard. RLM Investments, named for Rebecca Lynn Mitchell, keeping my maiden name in the business while I took Mark's surname in our marriage, had quietly amassed a portfolio of 17 properties across Manhattan, Brooklyn, and Queens. Properties purchased through carefully structured LLCs with separate banking accounts that Mark had never bothered to inquire about. While Mark assumed I was selecting throw pillows and accent pieces for wealthy clients, I'd been leveraging my economics, degree and finance background, the career I'd paused to support his, to build a real estate empire. My decorating money, as Mark dismissively called it, had been systematically invested in undervalued properties in transitioning neighborhoods. I scrolled to a particular property on my dashboard, a brownstone in Brooklyn I'd purchased 3 years ago through Riverview Holdings, one of my LLCs. The building had been completely renovated, converted into 4 luxury apartments that commanded top rental prices. One of those apartments, the garden unit with private outdoor space, was currently vacant. My phone buzzed with a text from Eliza, my attorney and oldest friend from college. "Received the papers. That bastard. My office, 9 a.m. tomorrow. Bring coffee and your vengeful spirit." I smiled, finishing my wine as I typed my response. "I'll bring coffee. But instead of vengeance, I'm bringing a business proposition. You're going to love this." The next morning, I laid out my plan for Eliza in her corner office overlooking Madison Avenue. "You want to let him think the apartment is marital property subject to division?" she clarified, reviewing the documents I'd brought. "Even though you purchased it 3 years before your marriage?" "Precisely," I confirmed. "Let him believe we need to sell it and split the proceeds. Meanwhile, I'll suggest the Brooklyn property as a compromise temporary housing solution." Eliza's perfectly arched eyebrow rose higher. "The Brooklyn property that he doesn't know you own?" "Exactly. The garden apartment just happens to be available. I'll offer it at a reduced rent as part of our separation agreement. Still steep enough to seem appropriate for the neighborhood, but positioned as a favor. And he'll never know he's paying rent to his soon-to-be ex-wife. Eliza's smile grew as she grasped the full picture. That's deliciously devious, Beck. But what about when he tries to bring little Miss Assistant to his new love nest? The optics of your husband moving his girlfriend into your property. Actually, I said, sliding another document across her desk, that's the best part. The standard lease for that building includes a no subletting or additional occupants clause without landlord approval and an additional 25% rent premium. Eliza's professional composure broke as she laughed. So if he wants to move her in, he'll be paying me even more, I finished, and I'll have the legal right to know about it. 2 weeks later, I sat across from Mark and his attorney in Eliza's conference room. Mark looked confident in his tailored suit, his salt and pepper hair perfectly styled, the picture of successful middle age. The man whose career I'd supported, by relocating 3 times, hosting countless client dinners, and putting my own ambitions on hold. The Manhattan apartment needs to be sold, his lawyer stated immediately. It's clearly marital property and represents the bulk of your shared assets. I glanced at Eliza, who nodded almost imperceptibly. Actually, I replied, I've been reviewing our finances, and I think I'd like to keep the apartment. Mark frowned. That's not realistic, Rebecca. You can't afford the maintenance fees alone, let alone buy out my share. I've run the numbers, I countered. With a small portfolio adjustment, I can manage it. What portfolio? Mark scoffed. Your little decorating business barely covers your personal expenses. I ignored the jab. But I understand your need for liquidity, Mark, to start your new chapter. The pause was deliberate, watching him shift uncomfortably. So I have a counterproposal. Eliza distributed folders containing my offer. I would keep the Manhattan apartment and assume all associated costs. In exchange, Mark would receive a larger percentage of our visible investment accounts. This is inadequate, his lawyer stated, but Mark was studying the document more carefully. There's additional compensation here, he noted, finding the portion I knew would catch his attention. Subsidized housing? I have a client with a recently renovated garden apartment in Brooklyn Heights, I explained. Lovely place, outdoor space, entirely updated. It would normally go for $7,000 a month, but they're willing to lease it to you for $5,500 as a favor to me. 2-year minimum, with the option to extend. Mark's attorney started to object, but Mark silenced him with a gesture. Brooklyn Heights? Which street? I named the address. A prestigious block with landmark brownstones where comparable units, typically rented for even more than $7,000. I know that area, Mark said, his interest piqued. Steps from the promenade? 2 blocks, I confirmed. Private entrance, dedicated parking spot. It would give you breathing room while you... I paused deliberately. Figure out your next steps. Mark's expression told me he was mentally calculating how this apartment would appear to colleagues, clients, and his young girlfriend, a prestigious address that signaled success despite divorce. I'd need to see it first, he hedged. Of course, I can arrange a viewing tomorrow. The following evening, I met Mark at the brownstone, using my designer credentials as pretense. The apartment was genuinely stunning. I'd overseen every detail. Of the renovation myself, from the waterfall island in the kitchen to the restored original fireplace in the bedroom. This is impressive, Mark admitted, running his hand along the marble countertop. You did the design work? Every inch, I confirmed. Though I'd done far more than design it, I'd purchased the building, managed the construction, and created a genuine real estate investment, all while he believed I was just decorating. And it's available immediately? The paperwork could be completed by next week. The owners are very accommodating. Technically true since I was the owner. All right, he agreed. This arrangement could work, temporarily, while we sort out the rest. 1 week later, Mark signed a 2-year lease with Riverview Holdings LLC, represented by a property management company that served as an additional buffer between my ownership and his tenancy. The lease included the standard clause about additional occupants requiring landlord approval and increased rent. Mark moved in the following weekend. I knew because I received automated notification when his electronic key fob was activated. The property management software I used allowed me to maintain professional distance while keeping tabs on all activity: maintenance requests, rent payments, security notifications. 3 weeks after Mark moved in, I received my first alert that a second key fob had been activated at the apartment. The following day, my property manager sent the standard notification letter about unauthorized occupants, along with the lease addendum requiring Mark's signature and initiating the 25% rent increase. His call came that evening, his voice tight with controlled anger. "There's been a misunderstanding with the apartment. I've received some ridiculous notice about unauthorized occupants." "Oh?" I kept my voice neutral. "Are you subletting, Mark?" Of course not. My girlfriend has simply been staying over. This is absurd. The lease can't possibly prohibit overnight guests." "Guests, no. But it sounds like she's been issued her own key. That suggests a more permanent arrangement, which would require landlord approval and an adjustment to the rental agreement. This is clearly an oversight in the lease. No reasonable rental in this market would have such a restriction." "Actually," I countered, "it's quite standard for premium properties. You can certainly look for alternative housing if the terms don't suit you, but I believe you signed a 2-year commitment." The silence stretched between us. I could almost hear him calculating the costs, not just financial, but to his pride if he had to downgrade from the prestigious address he'd already begun using on his business cards. "Fine," he finally conceded. "I'll sign the addendum, but I want it noted that I'm doing so under protest." "I'm sure the management company will add that to your file," I replied smoothly. "Will there be anything else?" 6 months into our separation, with divorce proceedings progressing steadily, Mark requested a meeting to discuss financial matters outside of our lawyer's presence. We met at a neutral location, a cafe in Tribeca, far from both his Brooklyn apartment and my Manhattan home. "You're looking well," he offered, studying me with newfound curiosity. I was looking well. Freedom from a marriage where I'd been consistently undervalued had been remarkably rejuvenating. "Thank you." "How's the apartment working out?" I asked innocently. "It's fine, though the management company is incredibly strict. They've raised the rent twice now, once for Alyssa moving in, and again when we adopted a dog, citing some pet clause." I nodded sympathetically, though I knew exactly what had triggered each increase. The dog, a golden doodle puppy, according to the pet registration form, had added another 10% to their monthly rent. "Real estate in this city is brutal," I commiserated. "My maintenance fees just increased as well." Mark leaned forward, his expression turning serious. "That's partly why I wanted to meet. Rebecca, I've been looking at our finances, and I'm concerned about your insistence on keeping the Manhattan apartment. The carrying costs alone will deplete your settlement within a few years." "That's thoughtful, Mark, but unnecessary. I've made some successful investments." He waved this away dismissively. "Your design business is doing well, and that's commendable, but we're talking about real estate mathematics here. The apartment costs nearly $20,000 a month with maintenance, taxes, and mortgage." I sipped my coffee, allowing his concern to hang in the air between us. "My finances are no longer your concern, but I appreciate the sentiment." His expression hardened slightly. "This isn't just sentiment. I don't want to be responsible when you're forced to sell 6 months after our divorce is finalized." "I won't be selling," I assured him. "How can you possibly afford—" He stopped abruptly, reassessing me with narrowed eyes. "What aren't you telling me?" I considered my options in that moment. Continue the charade or reveal just enough to end his patronizing concern. The latter won out. "RLM Investments," I said simply. "Your design business? What about it?" It's not a design business, Mark. It's a real estate investment company. I own 17 properties across the city, including the brownstone where you're currently living. The color drained from his face so rapidly I momentarily worried he might faint. That's not possible. The lease you signed with Riverview Holdings? That's my LLC. The property management company works for me. The rent increases you're so frustrated by? Those were written into a lease that I drafted. He stared at me in stunned silence before realization dawned fully. So every month I've been paying rent to me, I confirmed, with an additional premium for Alyssa and your dog. All perfectly legal and documented. Why? He managed finally. Some kind of revenge scheme? Not revenge, Mark. Business. You needed housing, I had a property available. The fact that you never bothered to understand what I actually do with my time, never valued my intelligence enough to even question the nature of my work, that's on you. This is manipulation, he argued, though his voice lacked conviction. This is consequence, I corrected. You made assumptions about my capabilities and financial acumen that were entirely false. Those assumptions led you to make poor decisions, including underestimating me in your divorce strategy. I gathered my belongings, preparing to leave. You're welcome to find another apartment, of course, though I should warn you that breaking the lease carries significant penalties. Business is business after all. As I stood, Mark reached out, suddenly, catching my wrist. Not forcefully, but with an urgency that surprised me. Was any of it real? He asked, and for a moment I glimpsed genuine pain beneath the anger. Our marriage? Or was I just another investment property to you? The question caught me off guard with its vulnerability. The marriage was real, Mark. My love was real. What wasn't real was the diminished version of me you chose to see and accept. I gently removed his hand from my wrist. That was the fiction. That couldn't sustain us. I left him sitting there, staring into his cooling coffee. Our divorce would be finalized within weeks, the final financial terms far more favorable to me now that Mark understood the true nature of my assets and capabilities. As for the Brooklyn brownstone, Mark and Alyssa continued to occupy the garden apartment, paying their premium rent promptly each month. Sometimes the most satisfying revenge isn't about punishing the past, but about finally being seen clearly in the present, even if that clarity comes too late to save what was once cherished. Each month when their rent payment hits my account, I don't feel vindication or anger. I feel something far more valuable, validation of the woman I always was, even when the person closest to me couldn't see her. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to. Pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.